Elijah was a man of fire. He stood against hundreds of false prophets. He called down flames from heaven. It was a moment of pure victory, unshakable faith. But right after the miracle, he broke. Alone in the wilderness, he collapsed. Not from failure, but from fear, exhaustion, and despair. How can someone so close to God feel so far from hope? If you've ever felt like your faith was strong, but still ended up burned out, this story is for you. Because Elijah's journey didn't end in the wilderness. It's where restoration began. Faith doesn't mean you won't fall. A lot of people believe that if your faith is strong, you'll never feel tired, never feel afraid, never feel like giving up. But that's not true. Even Elijah, one of the boldest prophets in Scripture, reached a point where he couldn't take another step. He didn't lose his faith. He just ran out of strength. And maybe that's where you are right now. You still believe, but you're tired, burned out, wondering if God has forgotten you. This video is not about religion. It's about restoration, about how God responds when his people fall apart, and how your deepest low might become the starting point of something sacred. Let Elijah's journey show you how to rise again, even when all you feel is empty. 1. From fire to fear. Even prophets break down. Elijah had just lived through one of the greatest miracles in the Bible. He stood on Mount Carmel, in front of a rebellious nation, alone, against 450 false prophets. He called on God with a simple prayer, and fire fell from heaven. Real fire, not a metaphor. Flames that consumed the altar, the stones, even the water they had poured over everything. The crowd was stunned. And for the first time in years, the people shouted, "The Lord, He is God." It was a clear, dramatic, unforgettable victory. The kind of moment that proves your faith is strong. The kind of moment where we imagine nothing could shake you. But that's not what happened. Because just one chapter later, Elijah is no longer standing in victory. He's running. One threat from Queen Jezebel, just one message, and he falls into panic. He escapes into the wilderness, far from everyone, far from the battle, and far from himself. There, under a broom tree, Elijah collapses and says, "Lord, I've had enough. Take my life." This is not a man who stopped believing. This is a man who has nothing left. How can someone so full of faith, someone who just saw fire from heaven, end up curled up under a tree, begging God to end it all? Because being strong in faith doesn't mean you won't get tired. It doesn't mean you won't feel afraid. It doesn't mean you won't reach your limit. And sometimes, what breaks you isn't failure. It's the weight of winning. It's the pressure that follows the miracle. It's the emotional crash that comes after the spiritual high. Elijah had given everything. He had stood up for truth, faced danger, watched God move in power. And now, he was empty. And maybe that's where you are right now. You believed, you prayed, you did everything right, and it still feels like too much. Maybe you've had your own Mount Carmel moment, a breakthrough, a spiritual high, a deep season of faith. But now, the fire is gone, and all you feel is fear, confusion, silence. Here's the truth we often forget. Even the strongest people of God can burn out. And that doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're human. Elijah didn't fall because he lost his faith. He fell because he was worn out. And instead of pretending to be okay, he did something many of us are afraid to do. He told God the truth. "I've had enough." And that honesty was the beginning, not of the end, but of restoration. So what can we learn? That fear can follow even the greatest victories. That faith doesn't mean you'll never feel weak, and that after every fire, there's often a moment of silence, doubt, and exhaustion. Don't be surprised by it. Don't be ashamed of it. And most importantly, don't think God has left you in it. Because Elijah's story isn't about a prophet who gave up. It's about a God who met him in the wilderness and reminded him that his journey wasn't over yet. 2. God didn't rebuke him. When God answers with kindness, not judgment, Elijah was done. After all the boldness, after all the fire and faith, he found himself under a broom tree, curled up in exhaustion, mentally, emotionally, spiritually drained. And he did what many of us have done in our lowest moments. He asked God to take him out of the story. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life." And here's where something remarkable happens. God doesn't scold him. He doesn't say, "Where's your faith? After all I've done for you, this is how you respond? Get up. Be stronger." None of that. Instead, God sends an angel. Not with a sermon, not with a warning, but with bread and water. The angel touches Elijah gently and says, "Get up and eat." No judgment, no shame, just care. Elijah eats, then lays back down, still exhausted. And God allows it. He doesn't rush him. He doesn't demand he bounce back instantly. He lets Elijah rest. Then the angel comes again. "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." Do you see the heart of God in this moment? Elijah was not rebuked. He was restored, not by lectures, but by presence, by rest, by food, by gentleness. This is not the image of a distant, demanding God. This is the image of a father who understands human limits. And maybe that's what you need to hear today. You don't have to perform for God when you're at your lowest. You don't have to pretend you're strong. You don't need to have the answers. You just need to be honest. God already knows the weight you carry. And He's not showing up to scold you. He's showing up to sit with you, to feed your soul again, to say in the quietest of ways, "I'm still here, and your story isn't over yet." It's in this stillness that we find one of the most powerful truths in Scripture. God doesn't walk away when you collapse. He draws closer. He doesn't define you by your moment of weakness. He holds you through it. And when the time is right, He speaks with a voice that doesn't shake the earth, but gently stirs your soul. "The journey is too much for you, but I'll give you what you need to keep going." That's the kind of God Elijah encountered. And it's the same God who meets you today. Not just in your victories, but in your wilderness, in your silence, in your breakdown. So when your emotions scream, "I'm done," when you feel useless, forgotten, empty, don't trust those feelings. Feelings are not facts. Instead, remember this: you are still in God's plan, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if you see no way forward. If Elijah's story tells us anything, it's this: God doesn't discard the weary. He revives them. And sometimes, the first step to being restored is just to eat, rest, and let God remind you. You're not alone. 3. Restoration is internal. God speaks in the quiet. After Elijah ate and rested, he didn't return to ministry right away. He didn't jump back into bold prayers or fiery sermons. Instead, he walked. For 40 days and 40 nights, he traveled through the wilderness until he reached Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There, he found a cave. And once again, he was honest with God. "I've been very zealous for you," he said, "but I'm the only one left. And now they want to kill me too." Can you feel the loneliness in his words? The deep sense of isolation. He didn't just feel tired. He felt abandoned, forgotten, alone. And then God answered. But not the way Elijah might have expected. God told him to stand outside because his presence was about to pass by. And here's what happened. First came a powerful wind, so strong it tore through the mountains. But God wasn't in the wind. Then came an earthquake, but God wasn't in the earthquake. Then came a fire, but God wasn't in the fire. And finally, a gentle whisper, a still small voice. That's where God was. Not in the chaos, not in the spectacle, but in the quiet. Elijah had seen God move in fire before. But now, God was doing something different. This wasn't about showing power. It was about rebuilding a heart. Because true restoration doesn't begin on the outside. It begins within. Not in noise, but in stillness. Not in crowds, but in caves. Not in fire from the sky, but in a whisper to the soul. That's how God speaks when you're broken. Not to overwhelm you, but to remind you that He's near, that He's been there the whole time, waiting for the noise to quiet, so your heart can hear again. And then God tells Elijah something else, something that changes everything. You are not alone. There are 7,000 others who have not bowed to Baal. You are not the last. You are not the only one. This truth pierces the lie Elijah had been believing. Because when we're tired, the first lie we hear is this: I'm the only one struggling, the only one left, the only one trying to stay faithful. But God reminds Elijah and us that we are never as alone as we feel. There are others standing too, even when you can't see them. So what can we learn from this? That restoration is not about being strong again overnight. It's about slowing down enough to hear the truth again. The truth that God is still speaking, that He hasn't forgotten you, that your story is still unfolding, and that He's not done with you yet. You don't need a miracle to rise again. You just need a whisper, a reminder, a quiet word from God that says, you're not finished. You're not alone. I'm still here. So if you feel broken, empty, or forgotten, don't chase after noise or wait for something dramatic. Instead, be still and listen, because the same God who whispered to Elijah is whispering to you now, and His voice still restores. God restores the weary. Elijah's story is more than just a tale from ancient scripture. It's a mirror for every soul who has ever felt tired, overwhelmed, alone. He was a man of fire, a prophet of power. But even the strongest break, even the most faithful get discouraged. Even the ones who've seen God move can still end up under a tree, whispering, I've had enough. But what makes Elijah's story beautiful isn't just the fire on the mountain. It's the God who came close in the silence. God didn't walk away. He didn't scold. He didn't demand strength. He fed him, let him rest, spoke gently, and reminded him, you are not alone. Your journey isn't over. And maybe that's what your heart needs right now. Not louder noise, not more pressure to be strong, but stillness, truth, a whisper that says, I'm still here, and I still have a plan for you. So if you feel like you're in your own wilderness, tired, confused, or wondering where God is, this isn't the end. This might just be the beginning of your restoration. In the next video, we'll explore how to hear God's whisper when everything around you feels like chaos. How to find clarity in confusion, peace in pressure, and direction in the middle of the storm. Watch now. How to hear God's whisper in the middle of the storm. Let the silence guide you back to the voice that never left.